Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 133, Meno 93b to E. Anytus has just claimed that any decent Athenian citizen could make Meno better, suggesting that the virtue of the decent Athenian citizen is something which can be taught even to people who are not Athenian. And decent Athenian citizens can teach even though they are not sophists, and they are not paid for teaching what they can teach. Unlike sophists, the decent Athenian citizens have the virtue which they teach, at least according to Anytus. And this reminded me of the Thessalians at the very beginning of the dialogue, who Socrates described as good horsemen. They have a reputation for being good horsemen. They must have the arete of being good horsemen. They have the techne, and they pass the techne down through the generations. In their case, it's only Thessalians who become good horse breeders. Socrates' reference to horse breeders, Thessalian horse breeders, was his first reaction to Meno's question about virtue, where Meno had given 4 exclusive options, but the answer Socrates gives combines all of the options. The techne and virtue of horse breeding is taught, it has to be exercised, and it appears to be a natural thing because Thessalians seem to have this techne naturally. We might be forgiven for thinking that to be a decent Athenian citizen, you need some teaching and a lot of exercising, and it would appear to be a natural thing among Athenians. However, because Socrates claims to be searching for teachers only of virtue, he concentrates only on the aspect of teaching. Hode uns gope ectus autologu, Themistocles ukagathon an phaies andragegonenai, ego ge panton ge malista. Examine in this way then, from your own argument. Wouldn't you say that Themistocles is a good man? I would indeed, most of all. Themistocles is the Athenian who pushed for a fleet to counter the Persian fleet, and without his preparations it's quite likely the Persians would have conquered Greece and stayed there. He later fell into disfavor, but in later generations his reputation was restored, and Themistocles is one of the greatest Athenians. Ukun kai didaskalon agathon, epertis alostes hautu artes didaskalos en, kakenon enai, oimai egoge, eper epuletoge. So, would you claim he was a good teacher? If indeed anyone was a teacher of his own arete, he too would have been. I think so, if indeed he had wished. Is it the case that Themistocles would be a good teacher simply because he is good? Being good would be a prerequisite if one is teaching one's own arete, because if you are not good, you don't have arete. If you are good, you do have arete, and then you can teach it. But if you are a good teacher, you have arete in teaching. Themistocles had arete in running a country, defending Athens from Persia. He was not necessarily a good teacher. And added to this, we have Anytus saying, Well, he may have been a good teacher had he wished to be. Anytus already knows that Themistocles was not a good teacher. He did not teach anybody to be as good as him. For Anytus, this is a bit of a problem because he's just claimed that Meno could go to any Athenian citizen, any decent Athenian citizen, and would become better as a result. So in theory, had Themistocles still been alive, Meno, according to Anytus, should have been able to go to him and ask him to teach him his arete, and he would have done, and Meno would have been as good as Themistocles. Anytus is opposed to sophists, although they claim to teach, while at the same time he is now obliged to agree that Athenian citizens don't always seem to be prepared to teach. Socrates pretends to be surprised by this. Al oie ucan ebulethe allus tetinas calus cagathus genestai maliste debu ton huon ton autu. You think he wouldn't have wanted others to become fine and good, especially his own son? The assumption here is that a good person would want other people to become good. When it comes to craftsmen, for example, Thessalian horse breeders, it does seem that they want certain other people to become good horse breeders, and these are their sons. They want the profession to be passed down in the family. It does seem to make some sense that good Athenian citizens would like other Athenian citizens to be good as well, because in theory at least, this would mean that the city would run properly. It would be a good city. Someone concerned about the fate of the city wouldn't necessarily concentrate on his son above all things, but Socrates uses the example of the son because it seems to be a foregone conclusion that fathers tend to teach their sons primarily, at least when it comes to crafts. E oie auton phtonen auto kai exepite des uparadidonai ten areten hen autos agathos en. Or do you think he was small-minded when it came to him and deliberately didn't give him the arete, the virtue, because of which he himself was good? Anytus doesn't react, so Socrates carries on. Euk akekoas hoti Themistocles Cleophanton ton huon hypeamen edidaxeto agathon. Haven't you heard that Themistocles had his son Cleophontus taught to be a good horseman? Epemenen gun epiton hippon orthos hestekos, kai egontidzen apoton hippon orthos, kai alla polla kai thomasta ergadzeto, ha ekenos auton epaidiusato kai epoie sesophon, hosodidaskalon agathon echeto. At any rate, he used to remain on horses, standing upright, and he used to throw javelins from horses, standing upright, and he did many other amazing things which he, his father, had him educated in and made him a sophos, an expert, in as many things as he could get hold of good teachers. Themistocles clearly cared about his son's education because he hired lots of different teachers who all could teach amazing things, and the son indeed learned how to do amazing things. So far as we know, these are things which Themistocles couldn't have taught his son. He did not have these skills. Anytus still hasn't reacted, so Socrates makes him react. e tauta uk akeikoas ton presbyteron. Akeikoa. Haven't you heard these things from older people? I have heard. Ukan araten gefusin tu hueos autu etiasat antis enai kaken. Isos ukan. So no one could accuse his son's nature of being bad. Perhaps not. Tide tode, hos Cleophontus, ho Themistocles aner agathos kai sophos egeneto, haper ho pater autu, ede tu akeikoas e neoteru e presbyteru, udeta. What about this then, that Cleophontus, the son of Themistocles, became a good and wise man, or expert man, just the way that his father was? Have you ever heard anyone, whether young or old, say this? No, not at all. Arun tautamen, oiometha bulestai auton ton hautu huon paidusai, hende autos sophian en sophos, uden ton getonon beltio poiesai, eper enge didacton he arete. Isos ma di u. Are we then to suppose that he wished his own son to be educated in these things, but in this Sophia, in which he himself was Sophos, he didn't wish him to be any better than his neighbors? If indeed virtue, arete, is something teachable, perhaps not by Zeus. Socrates keeps making the connection between goodness and Sophia, which means he's connecting arete, virtue, with techne, because it is in techne that one is or can be a sophos, an expert. When Socrates talks about the Sophia of Themistocles, he's not just talking about the ability to prepare a fleet to counter the Persian threat. He's still talking about the same arete which Anytus claims every Athenian citizen has. This is the arete of being a decent Athenian citizen. It might be that Anytus allows in this arete the ability to look after the interests of Athens, in which case Themistocles is indeed a very good example. Socrates is now suggesting that Themistocles didn't teach his son this particular arete because arete isn't something teachable.